All right, guys, welcome. I welcome you all to today's episode of our Python series. So as we can see on the screen, today we will be delving into polymorphism and composition, right? So in our previous episodes, we've had intensive session on intro to OOP in Python. We've checked what object-oriented programming is, why do we need it, right? What are the preferences it has over procedural programming style? We also had um, a session where we built a program or a solution to illustrate and to emphasize on the pillars that make OOP. In that session, I emphasized on these pillars. So the likes of encapsulation, inheritance, abstraction. And I also stressed that these are just what OOP can do. So they aren't really a topic or a syntax we need to have on our checklist to learn separately. So as soon as you are learning OOP, you are working with these pillars, right? So in our last session, we've talked about all of these I've mentioned earlier. And we've also checked what attributes are. So we understand to a very great extent what instances are. And I also emphasized that we have two types of instances. So we have the instance, the object variables, right? So the instance variables, and we also have class variables. I also demonstrated this citing examples and knowing when to use which. So knowing when to use the instance variable and knowing when to use the class variable. We didn't stop there. We also extended into methods. And I stressed that method is just basically function in a class, right? So when you have it in a class, it is referred to as methods, no more, no less. It has no difference from how you've been working with what functions. We didn't stop at that. We also delved into class methods. So we also checked, okay, we didn't check static method, right? But we checked instance method, we checked class methods, and we also appreciated what the constructor is. So the magic method, the init, so how to initialize your objects, so how to construct instances, and how to build objects after what building your class. So all in all, I would like to revise and say categorically that class is just what a template, right? A template we build. Are you trying to ask something? Who is that? So, okay. So class is just what like a template that we build. So then in this template, we can then be what crafting or creating our objects, right? So if you missed last session, so we have a recording on that. You can check the provided link for that so that you can bring yourself up to speed, because what we'll be doing today will be building on it. So I just had to have this refresher so that we can all align. Having said this, right, now let's focus on why we are here today. So today, our concentration or our focus will be on polymorphism and composition, right? And I have here, so what do you have in the chart? One second. Goodness, welcome. Okay, yeah, I have a crafts of what you will be checking today. So as you can see here, we are like delving into advanced concepts in object-oriented programming. And one of them is polymorphism. So polymorphism, as the name sounds scary, it's really like a toothless bulldog or a caged lion, right? So it has nothing to do with complication on OOP. So I will try as much as possible to break this down and make this make sense. So now, what is polymorphism? So let's start by understanding what the word stands for or what the word denotes. So basically, it's just like a word that was coined from two Greek words, right? Poly, which you are all familiar with. So it means when we have something, when something is a plural, right? So like many. So that is poly. And morph. Morph simply means what? Forms. So essentially it just means what? Many forms. So how does this translate, or how is it connected to programming, right? So you might be thinking, I don't care about what this literal word mean. So my concern is what it does in OOP, right? So in OOP, so basically, so it allows different classes to use the same method name, but behave differently depending on the objects. Now, let me break this down. So let's say, for instance, right? So we all know that in classes, so what makes up a class are what? We have the instances or the field or attributes and methods, right? So um, instances of field or attributes are just like properties, right? They are just like properties. So properties such as, let's say we have an object like an animal. So we can say a property of this animal is, okay, fine. Maybe we can check a dog. You can say a dog has a black color. You can say a dog is hairy. You can say a dog, we can also describe a dog like using its height, right? So and the likes. So also, in addition to its properties, so there are still some things a dog can do. So what a dog can do is what method is in OOP. So in this case, so what we are building objects from our class, don't forget I said class is a template. So we're building objects from this template. So we expect this object to also have two attributes. One attribute should be a feature and the other attribute should be a capabilities. For example, if you are building an object for a person, so the attributes expectedly should be his height, his age, his name, his email address, his first name, his last name, and a host of others, right? So what can a person do, right? Okay, a person can teach, a person can walk, a person can jump, a person can eat, a person can do sorts of what functionalities. So this makes up a what? A class. Now in this case, how is this now connected to polymorphism? So it's connected to polymorphism in the sense that, you know, we can have what in a class. We also checked this in our last session. So we also delved and dived into inheritance. So I also explained basically what inheritance mean. So inheritance, just for a recap, it's just building a subclass from a base class, or saying building a child class from a parent class. So consequentially, we expect a child class to inherit some properties from a parent class. It's just similar to a real world scene. So like saying a child would get some traits, right, from his or her parents, right? So makes up the child. So it's still the same relationship we are trying to what attribute to what inheritance. Now in this case, so now why we need polymorphism is in a situation whereby we have a parent class that has a method, right? All this would make sense in a moment when we start writing our programs, right? So I just want to give it more context before we delve into coding, right? So let's say, for example, we have a parent class that has an attribute, that has a capability to run, right? We now build a child from that parent. So that child also, we are also now defining the child to also have the capability to what? To run. Now, you might want to ask, would they not be like a conflict when you want to call these methods? Does it make sense? You might be curious to know if there would be a conflict or not. The mother has capability to run, and we are saying that this child should inherit this capability from his mother. However, we are still now going ahead to still define separately this capability for the child. What if we now want to call at object creation? Won't there be a conflict? So this is what polymorphism come to address, right? So polymorphism allows us to use different classes with the same method name, but behave differently depending on the object. So which means, in essence, this is possible. So we can have different classes. It doesn't necessarily have to be inherited class. It could be composition class. It could be separated classes, provided they are linked. So you have the opportunity and the flexibility to use the same method you use in class A, also in class B, as well as in class C. This is allowed. And this operation, like this thing we are doing, is what is known as polymorphism. Polymorphism is not really, it's not really far-fetched, right? So it is just the ability to use the same method in different classes. However, so we can now know their differences while we call on the objects or while we create objects. So we are going to demonstrate this in a moment. So now, I now stressed here that, okay, fine. Imagine you have different objects like, let's say, dog, cat, and bird. So we all know that these objects share like an attribute, so they can all speak. So this is a shared attribute. However, they speak in different languages, right? So as we all know, a dog can bite, cat can meow, and bird can what chirp, right? So, but essentially they can all what speak. So now let's now say you want to build a program to illustrate or um to enunciate this property of this object being able to speak. So are we expected to now be defining different methods for them? Or is there a possibility to use a method that would be the same for these different classes? Now the answer is what? Yes. By doing so, what you are practicing is what? Polymorphism, right? So now let's get into our play house so that this can make sense. Now, so let's say, for example, this is what I mean. So let's say, so we are going to use those objects as I cited in the context. So let's say we have a class. So this class is what? This class is what? We have a class of dog, right? So this class of dog, right? So we now want to define a method for this dog. So what can this dog do? So we say a dog can what? Speak, right? So this would just be a basic what? A basic method. So wouldn't be like what? Going extensively so that we can also cover composition in what? In detail. So we say what? A dog can what? A dog can speak, right? So now we now want to um, have a unique return value for this dog object. By the time we create a dog object, we want to have a what? A unique return value. So now this is where we now what? Specify how a dog speaks. So we can just say what? When we want to call on this one, we should say this dog should what? Bark. Do you get that? So you want to say this dog should what? You should bark. So now we now want to define another method, right? So you want to define another what? Another class. So now let's say the other class, we now have what? So what do we have again? So we have cat. So we have what? a class of
Sorry,
what?
are you
Cats.
coding?
Yes. Oh, sorry. I didn't share my entire screen. Sorry about that. So I'll stop sharing and share my entire screen now. Sorry about that. Is it visible now?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So I will take it again. So now, as I have illustrated, so now I am putting it into practice, right? So here we want to define different objects, right? So, but these objects, we want them to have the same method. I'll now check if it is possible in OOP, right? So we might be thinking, you might be thinking this would not be what's possible because we all know that we assess this what method by calling the method name. So what now happens if I say dog and I define a method for dog to speak? I also declared another class and call it cat. I also now define class to also speak. I also have a method, a speak method for class. I also have it for other classes. So what happens? Is this possible or not? So we would confirm that now in a second. So now we are now have a cat what? A cat class. So I'll now say def. So now notice what I'm doing here. I am still what? Defining the same method. The same method for what? For cat, right? So I will now say, since you are a cat, you should what? Meow, right? So it should return meow, right? As a cat. This is what we know a cat to what? To do. So now we would also say, okay, fine. Let's define one more class, right? So let's call this one. So we have dog, cat, and what? The last one is what again? 1 second. Okay, bird. So let's check for bird. So for bird, we would also define another class and say what? Bird, right? So now notice this method also. I'm still going to use pick as what? As the method. So we don't need any parameter. So but how does a bird speak? So it's what? A bird chirp, right? So you can say chirp for what? For bird. Now, this is where it might start to look ory, right? So you might be thinking, if we do all this, what if I now called speak method? Which of these would what answer, right? So this is how we are going to do it now. So it would make sense now in a moment. So essentially, once I am able to create an instance for any of these class attributes, right? Depending on the instance I am creating and the attribute I am initializing, by default, Python goes to that word, to that class to pick the method of that class. So let's say, for example, I now say class, oh, sorry. So let's say for dog, right? So I want to create a dog instance now. So this is the syntax for creating instance. So for creating objects, right? Object and instance, they are basically the same. So now I now say dog. So don't forget, the first thing you need to do is to what? To now say what? To call onto our what? Our dog class, right? So now, since I am initializing this with dog, right? So once I just say dog dot speak, what happens? Right? If I say dog dot speak, so let's print this and see what happens. So let's see what happens. Okay, this is still coming up. Can we see what happens? So it states, or our output is what? It bags. Can you see? Now let's check for another um another um class. So let's call this one cat. And let's say this is also what? Cat. Then here I would change this to what? To the object we have created to access the class what method. So here we can say cat.speak. So let's see what happens. So can we see it also says what? Meow. Can you see? So essentially, what polymorphism is all about is just to what? Enable us to be able to use the same method what in different classes, right? So it is now the objects. It is now when we create objects that we now define how we want to access this what these methods. So now we can also do something like this, right? To access all this method at once. So we can just say, since they are all, let's say they are animals, right? So let's define an animals object. So I want to access everything at once. So I'll be using a list here to instantiate this what this object. So I'll be using a list. So I say animals, right? So I'll now say animals equal to, so I'll be opening a list here. Then I'll be calling on all the what the classes. So the first thing is what? Dog, right? So after dog, so we have a what? A comma. Then we also have what? Cat. Then a comma, right? Then we also have what? Bird. Then a what? A comma. So now I now want to print out all the method for this what? For these classes. So here, expectedly, so what am I supposed to do? I'll just say animals, right? Dot what? Dot speak. So let's print and see what we have here. So if we say print, right? So let's see what we have. Okay, so we have an error here. So should now return my comma. Okay, so it should be fine now. So let's check again. Oops, still have another error here. Okay, so let's see now. Animals dot speak. Animals print animals dot speak. So we have dog, we have cats, and we have bird. So we want to print animals and the words and okay, list objects has no attributes. Just a second. Attributes error. List objects has no attributes. Speak. Okay, let me check this. What is happening here? This is supposed to, okay, one moment here, one moment. Let me close this and open again. So let's check again. Speak. We are returning the same method for all our classes, right? So we've defined it as speak. We have speak here also, right? So we also have speak here. So let me try this on 1 second. So let me try this on VI and see. So I'm just going to copy the code, right? I'm going to copy the code and open my Git bash. Okay, cd, let me check what I have there. Okay, mkdir test. So cd into test. So vi test dot py. Okay, so let me paste it here. So I have my class dog, right? So when I define it to speak, so it should return back, right? So same thing for cat, define speak and return to meow. And we also have the same for bird, right? So I am calling on them here. So I defined an instance for each animals. So I have them in a list. So, right? So then I am calling on this to print the list. So let's see what we have here. So let me print. So let's see what we have now. Py tests.py. Oops, there is a syntax error there. Which one returned the error? Oops, that's duplicated. Okay, so we need to debug this before we proceed or move ahead. Okay, so let me check again. I have the class, I have the cat, I have the bird. So animal, we have dog, we have cats, and we have bird. Oops, 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 oops. So essentially, what is missing here is our for loop, right? So since we are, what do you have in the chat? So since we are working with a list, you know, to access a list, we need to use what? To iterate, right? To iterate a list before we can print out the what? The elements in a list, right? So we can say for animal in, right? In animals, for animal in animals, right? So now what do we want to happen? So we want to print this. It was this iteration that was missing. So for animal in animals, so we want to print all the what, all the methods of these animals that we have what, that we have defined, right? So let's run it now and see what we have. Still have the same error. Which one is running now?
No,
And
you did not edit it from BI.
you said what?
You did not edit it from BI. You just edited it from.
Okay, okay, okay. So let's run it again. It's not VI. It's this.
You should have
Okay,
added
it's still
the
opened. VI is still
record.
opened. I don't know why my VI is not closing. Okay, it's closed. So let me run it again. Okay, we didn't print. We didn't print. We didn't print. So we need to print. So we say what? Print animals dot print animal should, or it should be animal dot speak. Should print what? Animal dot speak. So now let's see it now. So as you can see on the screen now, can we see what we have here on the screen? Can we see what we have here on the screen? So we now have what? All the outputs will be defined uniquely for what? Each class. So essentially what we did is, so this is just another what? Way or approach to what? To print out every what method you have what while using polymorphism, right? So we have a dog class, we have a cat class, and we have a bird class, right? So we now what? Iterated, right? So we defined an instance, we created an object. So we now use a list, right? So we use a list to create all the objects at once. So you have a dog object, you have a cat object, and we have what? A bird object. So now to print out the elements in this object, so as we all know, since we are dealing with a list, we need to use a what? A for loop. So that's why I had to what? Define this for animal in animals, right? So I want to print animal, then dot speak these methods for all the what? all the animal objects I have in my list. And as you can see, we have bag, we have meow, and we have sheep. So what we just did essentially is known as what? It's what? Polymorphism. So this is what polymorphism is in essence, right? So and what we just did now is and it's using polymorphism in what? In classes that has no relationship, right? So we can also do the same for inheritance, right? So what I'm saying is, so we all expect inheritance. We expect subclasses to inherit both attributes and methods of their mother classes, right? Of their parent classes, right? So now, polymorphism also allows us to now be using a method differently from what has been defined in a parent class. It is also possible. So let's check an example now. So this will be our last example for polymorphism before we now move into what? Composition. So I'm going to comment all of this. So before the other example, so if there's any question, please let me know. If there's any question, please let me know before we proceed.
Yes, yes, please, I have a question.
Yeah, yes, please go ahead.
Um, I'm trying to understand like why it printed it one after the other. I thought it was supposed to appear like in one line, all of it. Like, I don't know if you get me.
Okay, so
Like, I thought it was supposed to appear like it's like ba, comma, meow, comma, chirp. But I think it's went through it like one after the other. So if you want the list to appear like in one single line, like with like comma, like for everything to show, how would you like
so
print
that
it
is
out?
where we can do this um you can use end, right? So you can use something like 1 second. Let me check 1 second. So let me uncomment this. So you can say here and should be equal to, right? So we don't want it to have any space. So let's see what we have now. Oh, sorry. It should be a comma. So do you see what we have on the screen? So now if you want something to be in between, so let's say we want to add space in between, so we can say something like this. So do you see we have space in between?
Yeah,
Does that
yeah,
answer your
yeah.
question? Okay.
Yes,
So
thank
I
you.
think I think I know what triggered that questions, right? That question rather. So essentially, so what we did here while we created these objects is just like creating somewhat a database, right? So we also emphasized on this when we were like facilitating on data structure. So list is just like a database, right? So where we want to keep, if we have like multiple data or informations we are collecting, so we can keep all of them in in a list, right? So now how we print them out is depending on how we want to manipulate the outputs of our of our objects or of our data. So one of the tools that we can use, which is instrumental, is using this end, right? So that is that. So I would comment this out again. Then I now want to also go through another scenario of using polymorphism. But in this case, you are going to be using it with what? Inheritance. So why are we using it with inheritance? We're using it with inheritance because sometimes you might consider it to be illogical, right? You might be thinking of it being impossible because we expect our subclasses to inherit methods and fields or attributes from the parent classes. So how is it now possible again to still be able to use the same method in class, in parents and child, and being able to access them differently at instance creation. So this would confirm in a moment if this is possible or otherwise. So I will also be defining a basic class again, right? So in this class, so let's just say we have a class of what? A person. We have a class of what? A person, right? So a class of a person. So let's just say this is a class of a person. So, and in this class of person, you would have the first method, right? So we want to call our method role. So we'll be using this role method for all the classes we'll be creating. That is, for the child classes, we'll be using the same method for them. So, and we would now check how we can what transverse or how we can access individual method without conflicting one another. So this would make sense in a what? In a second. So now for our person class, we should be our mother class. So we'll be saying we have what? A method which is what? Role. So for this role method, so let's just leave it as this. So I will say it's return what? It's return, let's say I am a person, right? So, and we all know one thing about inheritance is inheritance, it's like, let's say for example, so when we have a class, right? So for us to create a child from that class, there must be somewhat like a relationship between them, right? So for instance, that child class must also have some feature that is related to what we have defined to the what? To the mother class or the parent class or the super class. So in this case, if you are calling our parent class person, we expect the children class to also have attributes similar to what a person can do. So in this case, we will now be calling our first child class, let's say student. Expectedly, a student is a person, right? So now if we still remember our syntax for what? Declaring inheritance. So in this parenthesis, this is where we now state that, okay, fine, I want this class to inherit the person class, right? So what we need here is just what? Okay, we also want to give this child class the same method name that we have given the parent. So which is what? Role, right? But in this case, we want you to be what? To say, okay, instead of I am a person, so but you, when you want to access you, differently from the parents, so you want you to let us know that you are a what? I am a student and I study, right? I am a student and I what? And I study. So now let's now have one more class, right? So that would also inherit from the what? The parent class. So let's say this one should be a what? A teacher. So expectedly, a teacher is also a what? A person, right? So we say this, so you should also what? Define a method with the same method name, then call it what? Self, instantiate with self. Then in this case, you return and let us know that what? I am a teacher and I what? I teach, right? So now we are done with our class, right? So this is inheritance in practice, right? This is just a basic inheritance. So now we want to access these methods. So now how do I access the class role method? The teacher's role method without conflicting with the student role method. So it's still the same thing as our first example, right? So in this case, you can access it differently or you use the same list scope as we did earlier. So you can just call this one teacher, right? So let's say teacher, we are creating an object of a teacher now, right? So when you say teacher, then we now create the teacher object, right? So you just say what? You just call on that method, teacher dot what? Dot role, right? So if we now print it, let's see what we have. Maybe it would now print and tell us I am a person, or it will tell us I am a student. So we are going to see that in a second. So when I run this, so can you see what it displays? It still lets me know that I am a teacher and I what and I teach, right? So let's do the same for students and let's see. Even for the fact that we use the same method name for every class we've defined, and they are still, as if that is not enough, they are still now what? A parent-child related class. But even at that, we can still traverse and what? Access individual method as we want. So now you call this one student.row. So let's see what this is displayed. Can you see? I am a student and I what? And I study. So what we just did in this example and the previous example is what? Polymorphism. This is polymorphism in what? In action. So polymorphism again just allows us to use the same method in different classes, be it a classes that does not have any related ties or classes that are built with what relationship, as this we have seen here. So that is that on what? On polymorphism. So before we proceed with composition, if there is any question, please let me know. Before we go ahead with composition, please let me know if there is any question. So I want to believe this is cleared to every one of us, right? So in that case, you wouldn't be wasting time. So we'll just comment all this out and go to composition. So the first thing I would like to clarify on composition is the fact that many a time it is confused for inheritance. However, their use case to an extent seem similar,
No, yeah.
but okay. Do you have a question? Okay, so they want this they sometimes seem similar, but we have what? A different use cases for them, and we have different syntax for them. So in this in this person class that I just defined, so this is what? Inheritance in play, right? So now for composition. Composition is just basically like having different classes, right? Having different classes, or having a different class that can access the method of another class without like bundling them together as we did in inheritance, right? How do I mean? So let's see it here. If you still remember, if you can still recall in inheritance, so we had to what? Force the person class inside the student and the teacher's what? Class. But it is a different case when we are talking about composition. So it is just designed where one class is built using objects of another class, right? It would use the objects of another class. So, but by context, we can all agree it is still what? Giving us the same meaning of what inheritance what can do. However, this is what I am able to devise for you to be able to know when to use composition and when to use inheritance. In context, they seem the same. However, in practice, they are different. Now, in inheritance, we can say the relationship of inheritance is a, right? So for example, if I build an animal class, right? So I can build related subclasses of what? Various of unique animals. So by saying, okay, I have a class cat, I have a class bird, I have a class dog, I have a class goats, etc., etc., right? Now, if you notice, for these subclasses, they share a primary what tie with the parent class, which is what, which boils down to they are all animal. So if you have cases like that, that is when you can think of what, inheritance. Okay, we are talking about person or human. So for human, you might want to build a program that's what, or you want to build like an OOP program for human. So for human, you might be thinking, okay, fine, in this case, am I to use inheritance or am I to use composition? So for human, so if your subclasses are somewhat, okay, you want to have a child class of what? Of a boy, of a girl, of male, of female, right? So in that case, you might what, you, it is inheritance is a what, is a go-to in this case, because they share what, they share a responsibility. So we can say a man is a what, is a human, a woman is a human, a cat is an animal, a dog is an animal, right? So that is inheritance. So that's, those are what the logic you can be using whenever you are confused on whether to use inheritance or composition. Now for composition, composition has what we know as the what, as a relationship. Now the difference is inheritance is a, but for composition, it is what, as a. For example, now, so let's say, now look at these instances I have here. So I say a library has books. Library is not a book, right? But one of the components of a library is what? Book. So you can say a library has what? Books. Does it make sense? So you can say a car has engine, right? So we can also say a playlist has songs. So when we have logics like this, like a feature that a grand class has, right? So in that case, you think of what? Composition. Does it make sense, guys? Does it make sense? Please, let's react. Let's react if it makes sense. Let's react, please, before we proceed. If it makes sense, please, let's react. Let's react. Does it make sense? Hello? Is it making sense?
Yes,
Yeah,
it
makes
is.
sense.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So this is what, this is just what the simplest device like I am able to come up with in order to know when to use composition and when to use what, inheritance. So since this is clear, so now this allows us to build complex systems by combining classes without tightly coupling them through what, inheritance. So I have said this before. So instead of like forcing a class inside another class, so you can use what we know as composition, right? So now to see this in action, so we are going to build a program, right? So we are going to build a library management system program, right? So now the feature or the components of this program should be that we want to use the composition model. So don't forget, composition, well, there are two different classes. However, a class uses the method of another class, but we don't tie them with what, inheritance. So now I want to use this model to build a library management system. So this library management system, so these are what we want this system to be. So we want to have a class with public attributes. So all these public attributes, private attributes, methods, class methods. So I have done justice to all of this in our last session. So if all of these are still confusing, so I would advise you please refer to our last session on what OOP. It would all make sense. So without delving much, so let's now go and have these words built. So I'll be creating a new file now. So let's call this file, I've not even named the file. So follow this instruction to build the system, right? So I would see composition in action. So let's call this libmansys, right? .py. Okay, so we've created our file. So now what is the first instruction? So let's see. What's the first thing? So you should what? Implement a book class with public attributes, which are what? Title and what? Author. So let's do this first. So we'll come back here. So you want to create a class, a book class. So we say what? Class book, right? So with what? We are instructed to have, so let's assume you are working for a client, right? So these are the what specification of our client. So, and
Then answer ama bana so yin anjima bana
who is
ruwa wani
that? Who is that? Can you mute, please? So can you see? So we have what? We are asked to have, oh, sorry, to have what and what? Let's check again. Title and author. Okay, that's correct. So we have our title, right? So we should also have what? Author. So these are what? This should be public, right? Public attributes. Author. Awesome. Oh, sorry. We have not even initialized. So, okay, so we want to initialize this attribute. So we say def init, right? Self. So I wouldn't be going iterative on this as such. So since we already covered this in our last session, so but if there is any question, please let me know. So you can just call my attention. So and I would do justice to the question, right? So now we have defined this. So and as per convention, we know what to do here. So you say what self dot title is equal to, oops, should be equal to what? Title, right? So what this is all about. So we have explained in our previous session. Oh, sorry, something is missing here. So and here should be self dot author should be equal to what? Author, right? So that is that on that. So we now there is still something that we are meant to do here. So the instruction still now states that we should also have a private attribute, right? Named is checked out. So now I would explain how we are to what attempt this, right? So when we are asked to what to have a private attribute, what a private attribute is, I believe we all know that, right? And how to define a private attribute. So, but what I am concerned here is how do we now track this availability? We have two things here. There are two requirements here. The first one is to what? To define a private attribute. So we know what we want to call it. So the second thing is to what? To now track its availability. So essentially, so what we'll be doing here is, so we now go ahead and define this private attributes. Yeah. So by saying self dot, I think the name should be is checked out, right? So now, how do we now track availability? So by default, we want to believe, we are creating a book class, right? So now, the first thing we need to understand is we want to create a system that tracks how book is coming in and going out of a library, right? So, but the first thing we are doing is we just want to have a class that just what have objects of books. So the objects of books in the sense that, okay, fine, no, we can create one, two, or more objects of books, right? So now we can now identify these books by their title and their author. And we also want this book class to be able to confirm for us if a book is what available or otherwise. What the library class will be doing is to now build somewhat like a database that we can now have like a library system that can keep track of thousands of books. So that is what we are using that library class for. right? And this is why we are now using composition. So I'm going to explain this in detail in a minute when we get to library. So now, the first thing we need to do logically here is to assume a book is available. To assume what? A book is what? Available. So, and how do we assume if a book is available? So now let's just say it's checked out, like asking a question. Is this book object, you know, be creating an object of a book. So this book object we are creating, we want to believe, okay, fine, after we've created it, is it available or is it checked out? Now, essentially, when we say we create an object, logically, what do we expect? It is available, right? So that's why we now set this to false. Why do we set it to false? It's just like basic question. Is it checked out? No. So which means if it is false, it means the book is what? Available. Does it make sense? We are asking, is this book object we'll be creating in a moment, is it checked out? We now said no. And no refer towards availability. That is why we are setting this to what? To false. So now, when we now set this to false, we should now have methods, the functions that will now be tracking availability of this book. What if this book eventually is now checked out? How do we build a system that automates this process, that can confirm if a book is checked out, that can also confirm if the book has been returned? So now, if we now check here, so we now have another instruction here. What? Your book class, if you check the third paragraph here, your book class should provide methods to check a book out and return it, affecting its what? Availability. So which means expectedly we are meant to still define some methods in this class, in this book class. So one of the methods should be able to check out books, so that it would now change the status that we have defined while we are what? Constructing our class. You know, we constructed it to be what? To be false, that is, to be available. What if this book has now been checked out? What if someone has come to borrow this book? We expected that book to not be what? Available. So that is what we want to define in our checkout method. Now, what if the borrower returns the book? Expectedly, the book should be available. How do we also build a system that now change that status of false again? Status of true. Don't forget, when it was checked out, it was changed to true. It is now being returned. So which system will now be responsible for changing the status back to what? To false. So essentially, we'll be defining some methods here to undo that for us. So we will now call the first one, let's call this one checkout. Right? So let's call this method checkout. So what this would do for us is to help us to automate the process of changing the status of this is checked out that we set to false to true when the book is no more available. So that is what we are doing literally, right? So that what we are doing literally is what I have just explained. Now, how do we now represent this in code, right? So we now say here that, okay, fine, no, checked out. So we say if self dot, don't forget, dot what now is checked out, right? If self dot is checked out, right? Okay, no. This should be if not. If not, we will use inverse here. If not, which means, so let me explain this. What we are saying is, if this book has not been checked out, now I want to check it out. Does it make sense? If this book has not been checked out, which means if this book is available, now I want to what? Check it out. So that's why we now say if not checked out, right? If not checked out, then we would now say here that what? Self dot is checked out should be what? Should be what, guys? should be true now. Does it make sense? Let me explain again. Essentially, we by default, we declared the is checked out instance of field to false, believing this book is available. So we now want to define a method that can change the status of this availability. So if we now borrow a book, should change it to what? When it is in false, it means it's available. So when it is in true, it means it is what? It is not available, right? So we need to define a method that would perform this logical operation for us, right? So now, while defining this, so we need to state that if this book has not been checked out, now I'm checking it out. So now when I change the status of false to true, it means this book is no more available. That's what I just did here, basically. So now if this, I will now say here that if this runs successfully, then return true, right? So if otherwise, so just return false. So this is just basic logic, right? So if it's run successfully, so return true, right? So if it fails, return what? False. So we have been able to what? Define the checkout method, right? So how we are going to use this checkout, you would be saying that by the time we are now what? Working or constructing our library class. So now the next thing we are also supposed or meant or required to do is to do what? Where is that thing again? So we should also, so don't forget we have some methods, some functionalities to build here. So another one is just what? To return, right? To return a book. So how do we now return a book? So how do we define a method that what? Tracks if a book is returned. So don't forget, if a book is returned, it means that book is what again? That book is available, right? So we can just say here, return underscore book, right? So we say self, right? So in this case now, the logic we'll be using here is if it's checked out, right? If self dot is checked out. What are we saying? We want to return a book. So we need to first confirm if this book has already been borrowed or not. That is what we are asking here. Because you can't return what has not been borrowed, right? So, but if this book has already been borrowed, though, so which means currently the book is not available, then this is where the return now wants to act, right? Then someone is now returning the book. So we now change this again back to what? Self dot is checked out. Then we change it to what? To what, guys? To state availability. To false. Thank you. So here we can say what? To false. Then we do the same logic. So if this is successful, return true. And if otherwise, return what? False. So we have two functionalities now, right? So one is to what? Check out book for us, and the other is to what? To return book, right? To confirm if book is now available. So what we just did basically in these two methods is just to manipulate this is checked out attributes that we defined, that we constructed, right? So the first one, we manipulate it and change it to true if a book is not available. And the second one, we manipulate it and change it to false if the book is available again. So that is what we just did. So we now need one more method here. So this method will help us. This method will just help us. Instead of we having to disturb our brain to be doing all this logic, to be thinking, is it available? Is it not available? Right? So we can just define like a plain method that will just be what? Returning a true or false for us. So that anytime we need this is checked out. So we can just call on this method. Anytime we need what is checked out, we can call on this method, right? And essentially, another usefulness or use case for this method is because we are defining a private field, a private attribute here. And what private attributes mean is we don't want this private attribute to be what messed with. We don't just want to give it what accessibility anyhow. So we just want to give like a view only. We don't want to give edit only. So even though we are calling it in other classes, we don't want it to just be accessible. We don't want it to be what? Open. We want it to be like a closed attribute. So we can now define another method that we can be calling anytime we need this is checked out instance, right? Or field. So we can call this one is what? Available. So you can just, let's say we can just call this one is available. So what this one is doing essentially is just to what? To let us know if this book is available or not. So we won't be doing anything critical or technical in depth in this. So you can just say return not return not self dot is checked out. All right. So that's what we'll be doing here. Return not self dot is checked out. So when we get to class, the library class, so this method we just defined now would make sense because it would really help us to access the private attribute is checked out we have in our book class. So without having to tamper or mess with the private what field. So basically, I believe we've been able to what fill in the vacuum of the requirement for the what? For the class, for the book class. So according to the request, we are to what? Define these attributes and also have some what methods. So as per the requirements. So we should have methods that would control the availability of a what? Of a book. So which we have in place. So you have one that would help us to change the status from being available to not available, and the other that would also now reverse the case, right? So that is that on that for this. So now the next one is to now what? So the next one now states implement a library class with a private list. So this private list, we should call it what? Books, to store instances of book. So to put it in more context, what this library class wants to do essentially is just to what? To be storing instances of book. You know what instances are? Instances are the same as what? Objects. By the time we now have multiple books, we have copies of book. So we can't be relying on a book object. So we want to keep track of what? Our array of books. So now we now need to create a system that will be tracking the availability of this book. So if a new book is being brought to our library, so how do we save it in our what? In our shelf? So if a book is being borrowed, right? How do we what? Identify that this book is not available at the moment? And if that book has been returned, so how do we know? And how do we also now have a catalog of our available books? So that is what the library class wants to do. So now let's start with the first instruction, which states it should what? So let's define our what? Library class. So with a what? With a private list named book, right? So to store instances of what? Books. So in this case, we can now say, so it's still the same thing, the same approach for defining class. So we use our class keyword, right? Class. So and the name should be what? Library, right? So and we are to what? Use a constructor. So the init, right? The init is a constructor, right? So which will be called by the instance of creating objects. So and we are to what? So since we are creating a private attribute, so we don't need to state that or specify that in our words, in our init declaration. So but we can state it what in its what block of code. So in this case we say what? Self.book, and as required it is supposed to be what? To a list, right? So since we don't have anything at the moment, we've not started storing instances of books, right? So we leave this as what? An empty list. Does it make sense? So we just leave this as what? As an empty list, and we've been able to what? To attempt that requirement. So the next one is now to do what? So when we leave this as an empty list, so the next instruction is to, 1 second. So let me check the next instruction. So this is supposed to now have some methods. Okay, so methods like that we can use to add books to the list, that we can use to check out book. So let's first define our method that would add books to the list. So we did the same thing in our last session, right? So where we have somewhat a program that can also store data inside a what? Inside a list. So you are just basically doing the same thing. So we'll call this method add book, right? So let's call it add book. So this add book, we would give it this compulsory parameter, which is self, for its object that will refer back to its object. Then we'd also have another parameter, right? So this parameter will be book. So which means any book, by the time we want to start adding book, so any argument we pass here will now be replaced by this what? By this book, right? So that is why we are declaring this as this. So this one is not far-fetched, right? So we just say self dot this book, right? Dot append. So since we are dealing with lists, don't forget. So what do we want to append? Anything we enter here as our book should be appended here in the list. Does it make sense? Self.book.append, then the book we are trying to add into our what? Library list. Into our what? While we are instantiating or initializing the library object, or while we are trying to add new books to our library collection. So any book we add here should be what? Should also be what? Added to the collection. So we've been able to define this. So now the next one is now to what? Define a method, right? We want to define a method that would check out books in a library. Now, it is important to notice here that we have two different classes here. One is dealing with just a single book, while the other one is dealing with what? Collection of books, right? That is why we are storing this collection of books inside a what? A list, right? So these books will now be the elements of this list. So now, how do we now track the list of books? So when a book, let's say we have 5 books in our library, when one is borrowed, how do we track it to know it's no more available? When it is returned, how do we track it to know it is now what? Available? That's why we now need to define another method here that check out what? Books. So we can call this one check out book method, right? So we call it this, right? So this should now take another parameter here. So the other parameter should be for what? For the variable that we'll be using to track this book. So maybe is it title name or is it by author? So when someone wants to borrow a book, right? So do we confirm with our system that this book has been borrowed by entering the title of that book? Yes, we are using title. That's why we'll be using title as parameter here. So we say what? Title. So don't forget, we defined the instances, the attributes in our book. Hence, we are now building the connection now, right? So now, this is composition in action. This is what? Composition in action. We have 2 different classes. We have the book class, and we're also building a library class. Can you say I'm now referring to a title attribute that we defined in our what? In our book class, right? So what we just did basically is just what? Composition, no more, no less, right? So now let's now continue with what? This definition. So what do we need? We are dealing with lists, right? So we want this to be able to iterate our what? Our list elements to check for what? The books we have there. And once you see this title, remove it and tell us that it's no more available. So we start with what? For book in self. Don't forget our what? Our list is what? Self.books, right? Self.book, right? So we say for book in self.book. So if book dot now, if book dot what? These are what? Iterating variable. We are sending the book variable an assignment now. So if this book dot, if you now see this title, the title that will be entered, right? If book dot title is now equal to, if book dot title is equal to the title that would be what? Provided by our what? Library manager. So the title that will be provided here, if book dot title. So while you are iterating and checking the titles inside this book, so once you just see that this title provided here is the same thing as what? As this title, then, and so we need two operation here. So this we need two operation here. So in our data, in our control flow, so we also did this, right? So what we are doing here is we are doing what? A logical operation, right? So we are doing a logical operation. So we want these two requirements to be met, right? So one of the requirements is if book.title is equal to this title provided, and book dot, and again, so another thing we also need to check is to also check if this book that someone wants to borrow is also available. It's equally important, right? So the first thing we need to check for is to check for the title in our lists. Then after checking for the title, you also need to check if this book is available, because a book that is currently unavailable cannot be borrowed. It cannot be checked out. So you need to also state this in our what? In our what? In our logical operation. So using this if statement, so we now say, and book dot. Now, if you remember, this is available that I mentioned earlier, right? So this is where we now need it. So instead of us using that is checked out attributes we defined in our book class, I have told you every time we now want to check the status of that book now, instead of calling that is checked out, we can just refer to this what is available method, right? So we now say what if book dot title is equal to title and book is available, right? So what should happen? We now say what book, we now call that method, that checkout method we defined in our book class. So we call it, can you see? We now call this, okay, if you've checked and this book is available. So since we've defined, so we want to change the status of this is checked out now. So now what? So when we now call this one, it changed the status to what? To true. So which means basically that book is no more available. So you just say what? Book dot checkout. Is it making sense? So book.checkout. So now let's just say we want to make our program pleasant. So here we can just say, when we now say the book is checked out, then print, so print something like, let's say, I want us to print something like, okay, we are going to access it using the title, right? So you can say print something like self book dot anything we have as the title of the book. So you can say book dot title, right? Has been checked out. Oh, no. Let's say something like book dot title is checked out successfully. Do you see that? You can say what book, that book that someone is trying to borrow. So you can just like return a what an output to confirm that it was successful. So you can just say like and it's is no more available. So I think someone is trying to ask something. Okay, Victor, go ahead, please. Yeah, go ahead, Victor.
I want to ask, this library class now, if should it like okay, this is very the the book class.
Victor,
Please,
you are not audible. You are not audible.
okay, I mean, can you hear me now?
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
proceed.
so I said, I think library class should inherit book class, I think. So it didn't work like that because you use some functions from the book class inside library. So I think basically we could have made library class inherit class, but would that work?
Okay, thank you for that question. I have stressed this earlier. So I have said, okay, Grace, I will take your question in a moment. So I have said that, okay, are you trying to answer the question, Grace?
No. I'm trying to ask a question. I'm kind of confused. I
Okay, one
wanted
moment,
some
please.
clarification.
Okay, one moment, please. Let me try to answer Victor's question. So, Victor, if you can still remember, right? I said it earlier that we have two models, right, for building relationship between classes. One of them is inheritance. Alternatively, we also have composition. It is in inheritance that you force, like you add code one class inside another class, right? While inheritance, you don't need to add code, right? So once you define both classes, so by the time you start building connection, Python would understand. And in instances where you now when you make the decision, when you decide on when to use inheritance and when to use composition, is what I illustrated, and I used an analogy of when two classes have is a relationship. For example, you are building a program of animal. So it makes sense to build subclasses of cats, dog, sheep, etc. Right? Because a cat is an animal, a dog is an animal. So they have is a relationship. It's just like coining or carving another object out of what an existing object that share the same relationship ties, like a family tie, right? That is when you think of what inheritance. But when you are building a program that has somewhat a feature of another program, but they are not like closely related as such. For example, we can say a library has a book, but a library is not a book. Library and book are different. We can also say a car has an engine. A car is not an engine. We have other objects that also has what? Engines. So in that case, if you want to build any relationship, in that case, right, to what? To map them together, you think of what? Composition. Does that make sense? So now that is why in this case, since we are building a library tracking system, right? A book management system. And since we can't have a direct affiliation that is connected by ties with a library and a book, it makes sense, or it is sufficient, or it suffices in this case to use composition. And when we are using composition, right? So by default, if you see here, we started building this relationship here. So in this case, right, I said here that book.title. I have defined title in our book class, right? The the availability or flexibility for me to still be able to use that title inside another class without using inheritance, it's basically composition. I've said this, all these things are just pillars. They are just what OOP can do. So what we are doing is, it is not as if we are learning composition differently. We are practicing composition. This is what OOP can do. And what we are doing currently is what? Composition. Am I able to answer your question? Victor, please confirm if I am able to answer your question.
Yes.
Awesome. All right, Grace, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Please, I think I got confused in that method is available where we return sorry.
Do you mean in this our book class? Are you referring to this method in our book class? It's available method in our book class.
Yes, sorry. I got confused where we defined that it's available method in the book class. So
Awesome,
we said
awesome.
we returned not self dot is checked out.
Yep.
So I believe what that means, like to my own understanding, the way you explain it, is like the opposite of is checked out, which means that it has been checked out and it's not available. So that means it's changing it to false. So that means
Yeah.
anytime we call on the method is available, it means that the book has been checked out. So now when we came to this class library and we are defining checkout book, and you're like for book in self the book, if book the title is equal to title and book we call the method is available, which means that the book has been checked out already. That's the way I understood it. So I don't know, are we supposed to use this like the dot is available, which means that the book has already been checked out when we are trying to check if it is available? Like I don't know if you understand me.
Yeah, I understand it quite well. So let me put it in more context, right? So what we are doing here basically is just to make it easy for us to understand or to access the status of if a book is available or not. And also, in addition to that, since it's a private attribute, we don't just want it to be like open, we want it to be closed, right? So since we are using it in another class, so we don't want it to be accessible as such. So that's why we need to define a new method. So now the logic we are now using is, we are saying that self dots, if it is self dots is checked out, right? If it is equal to true, then what we are saying here is, if it is equal to true, then it is not true. Does it make sense? If it is equal to true, then it is not what? It is not true. So what we are reading basically is, we are just using that not to flip it to return true or false. We are using the not to flip for that method to now return either true or false. So for example, if we say that currently the book is checked out, if it is true that is checked out, right? So then the not we are saying is, it is not true, it is false. Then if the answer is false, that if this book is available, then we are saying it is not false, it is equal to what? To true. That's why when we call it in this method, so we say it is available now, right? It is currently what? Available. So, and we want to change it to not what? To not being available. So that is why we call it directly. So it is currently available. So now to change the status here, so we call it directly. We didn't say and not book is available. We are saying and book is available. And if we say and book is available, so we are saying this what? It is true. Right? So then we would now use this method. We call on this book dots to go and call on that check out method, right? So by the time we call on that check out method, it changes the status of this is checked out from being available to not available. So it's still the same thing as saying, okay, let me use this. It will make sense now. It's still the same thing as saying, if but it's just a best practice, right? Just a best practice. You can also say if book dot, right, is checked out is equal to false. Sorry, should be double equal to. This is what we are using that line to do. Can you see? If book title is this and book dot is checked out is equal to false. That is, if this book that we are looking for, that someone wants to borrow, is equal to false, and I told you false means what? It's available. So that means it's available. Then I want to check it out. And when I click on checkout, I mean what? I don't want the book to be available again. But by best practice, right? We don't want to leave this to what? We don't want it to be what? Too flexible. We don't want it to be flexible, right? We want it to be rigid since we are declaring a private attribute. So that is why we now use this logic to inverse the what? The availability of is checked out. So if we want to call it directly, so we say if book dot is available, so we should do the same thing as if book dot is checked out is equal to false, right? So if book is what? Available, then what should happen? So I want to check this book out. Does it make sense now, Grace?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Awesome. So that's what we are just doing basically. So we don't want to be messing with that attribute. So that was why we had to define this extra method to allow us to access it, right? So okay,
But although that method, it was the previous one where you just made it equal to false. I think that one was more relatable, like to
yes,
beginners. It was
yes,
more beginner friendly. But
you
now that you
get.
explained, I get it now.
Yeah, exactly. This is just like a best practice when you are dealing with private attributes, right? So either ways, like it's correct either way, right? So we are just using this for what? For convention. So now then if we now say the book is available, right? So then we want to check it out. So when we check it out, so we want an output to now confirm that okay, oh, this so book is checked out successfully and it is no more available, right? So here it is all good here. So you can just say if this works, return true, right? And if this fails, so what if this fails, right? So, or what if we can't find this book? What should happen? What if this book we are looking for, we can't find it? So what should happen? So you can now say in this case to also print that what else what? So we should print so we are going to use the same formats so that we can customize our book title. So we are going to say book.title. Anything we have as the title of this book, I've left out my F string, right? So book.title is not what? Is not available. So which means maybe someone has what already checked, oh sorry, wasn't checked out, right? So let's say is has already been checked out, maybe before now. So let's use that as being checked out, right? So if you can still recall our if statement, right? So if statement, if one block fails, it implements the other, right? So what we are just saying is if this one fails, then implement this and let us know that this book we are trying to check has already been checked out before now, right? So which means it's not even available for what? For checkout. Then, so this means it failed. Then you can return. So all this return false, return true are just what? They are just convention, right? So your program should work without them. So then what if we can't even find any of this book in our library, right? So that should now take us to our what? Our for loop that is running the iteration to search for that loop, to search for that book in our what? In our collection. So it is running. What if it can't find the book? What should happen? So here we can now say that what? The book, in this case, this title we are looking for, right? So this title, book dot title, right, is not in the library. So you can use something like that. Book dot title is not in the what? In the library. So which means cannot be what? Cannot be found. So with this, and we have been able to what? To define the method that would now loop over a collection of book in the library, right, to confirm if book is available or otherwise. So if this fails, so as said before, these are just convention, right? So return false. So this is this for what? For a method that will be checking for what? If someone wants to borrow a book in our library system. So once we just enter the title, we confirm if the books are available, who is available, then check it out. So checking it out, change the status that we don't have this book anymore, right? And let us know that, okay, this book has been checked out successfully and currently it's no more available. And if this book has been checked out before now, before this new borrower comes, you should also let us know that this book is not available, right? And if we search and we can't find it, so we should also know that this book is not in our what? In our library. That's what we just did here. So now the next thing is to now define the method, our library method that will be checking if a book has been returned, right? So it will be doing two things. The first thing is to what? To check if a book has been returned. And the second thing is to also what? Now change the status of that book to being available. So that would now tell us that, okay, this so book is now available for new borrowers, right? So we are doing basically the same thing, just little tweak, right? Just little logic changes. But we're doing basically the same thing. So we'll be defining, so we can define this as return book, right? So I want to ask something here. I want to ask something here so I can be sure we all align. So I'll be asking that after defining my method. So I'll be calling this. So we'll also be searching or be returning book using the title. So we'll be using the title parameter here also, right? Okay, so to return this book. Now, before I proceed or before I move on, in this library class, right, I am defining a method with the method name return book. If you can also check the book class, I am also using the same method name return book. What is this thing I am doing? In practice, what am I doing? I want someone to please answer that. In the library class, we have two different classes now. In the library class, I'm using a method name return book. In the book class, I also defined another method with name return book. In practice, in OOP, what is this thing we are doing?
Is
What is
it
the term?
polymorphism?
Exactly. This is polymorphism in play, right? This is polymorphism in play, right? So that's what I'm saying. In OOP, you shouldn't allow all these things to intimidate you. While you are writing your program, it is what you are doing already. They are just giving them names. Okay, fine. OOP can do this. OOP can do this. And they're not finding like grammars for them. You be hearing encapsulation, you hearing um abstraction, you hearing polymorphism. What we just did here is was even without me knowing that there's anything polymorphism, I'm already using it. Right? So I just had to take that detour. So now let's now get back to business. So self-title, right? Then we want to define the same thing. So since we are working with a list, we are still going to iterate. So we are going to say for book in what? In self dot underscore book. Don't forget your book is a what? Is a it's a private class, so don't leave out your underscore, otherwise your program would not work. So for book in self dot underscore book, so still the same thing to find our book. If book that is running this errand dot title, right, is equal to title, anything we have as our replace value for the title placeholder, right? If it is equal to it, and the second logic. And now, in this case, we now need to use a reverse logic here, because now we want to check if the book is not available now. Because you can't return what is available. What you want to return is what is not available. If you don't go to a library to borrow a book, you can't go to a library and say you want to return a book. Can you see what this is available is doing now? So in this case, you would now use not and not book dot is what is available, right? Yeah, and not book what dot is available. Then you would say book running this errand dot, you now come and use our method in our book class. What are we calling now? What are we calling? Can anyone say it? What are we calling now? Which method are we calling our book class now? What method are we calling our book class now? If a book is not available, so you want to change the status of that is checked out to pause again. To now state return book. Thank you. So here we just say what? Book dot return underscore book. Simple as that. I think I have an issue with syntax here. Okay. So book dot return book, right? So now we should design a program that would give our user good experience, right? So if the book has been returned, so we should have a message. So you can now say print, print what? So what can we use here? So here we can say print. So we use our f string, right? F string, and we can say, sorry, f, then our f string, then say that what book dot title, right, has been returned. Yeah, that suffices. Book dot title has been what? Has been returned. Right? So you can just put more metadata, like saying, and it is now available, right? So you can say it is now available. So then we close our string. So so this should be fine. Then so just convention. So if this works and runs successfully, return true. So if otherwise, so else, so we can say what should be our X. So our print statement should be what here? We will say f string formatter, then our parentheses, then our book dot title, right? Is what here now. So what can we say here? So you can just say it wasn't checked out, right? So because what we are saying here is if it has been checked out, right, return it and say it's not available. But if it hasn't been checked out, so what are you returning? Which means it has always been available, right? So we can say book dot title was not checked out, right? So was not checked out. So that is fine. So, and if this now fails, so you can return false for this. So, okay, sorry. So which means we are returning false to state that this did not run as expected. So, and what if the book we are now searching for is not even in the library? That is when we can now say here that, so in this case, just print for us the F string again, right? And our parenthesis, the book dot what? Dot title is not in the library, right? Is not in the library. Awesome. And then we close our quotes. What is happening here? Okay, I closed the quotes earlier than expected. Okay, so it should be fine now. So with this, so it's failed now. So we want to return false. Awesome. So now we are good with these two, right? So now I think it still remains one more thing for us to do, right? So and the last thing for us to do is to also now be able to list all the available books, right? Maybe after books has been checked out, we want to know the book we now have currently in our catalog, or new books are returned or new books are added to our library. So we should also have a method, right? Our program should have that capability to be able to now tell us that, okay, now these are available books. So we are going to call this one available books. So let's call this available books, right? So this should just take self since we are not taking anything. So this is also what? This is also like running an iteration. So don't forget, we are dealing with a list, right? And for list, we need to what? To iterate, right? To iterate. So when we iterate, it loops over all the books in the what? The list, then print them out, right? So now I would now save this inside a variable called available, right? So because I want this to give us a very pleasant output, right? So I want it to be a very pleasant output. So I would now say available. So I will define my loop inside this available. So this, what I'm doing is just like what? A style, like writing a loop, right? It's still the same thing as what we are all familiar, like saying for loop, for book in self.books, blah, 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 if book is available and the likes, right? So, but yeah, I'll be saying book, then for book in self dot, don't forget our underscore book, right? If, so I want to define it together with the if statement here. So I can say if book dot, we will now call our available option method again. So if book dot is available, right? If book dot is available, so what should happen? So here, and I want to do something. When a book, before you even print out anything, first print out available books as our first output. So I now say if available. So which means any book that you find after your iteration, if they are now available, right, then print for me. Print just let's say available books. Available what? Books, right? So then again, I now want to check into that. Don't forget this, we are keeping this iteration now. We are storing it inside this available variable, right? So now if book are now available, first print out available books before you even displayed the book, before you display the books, right? So after printing the available, so I now want to iterate inside the available again. So I can have a custom printout. I want to have a custom printout. So I will now do another iteration inside this available variable that is storing the list of the books we have available. So in this case, I can just say for B or anything, you can call it anything for B in, since we have used book before, so you can use another thing. So we can say for B in, now in available, right? For B in available, then print. So this is why I'm doing all of this. So I can be able to have a custom output. So I want to use F string. So in this case, so I want it to now be that, okay, oh, fine, oh, this so B dot, so I'll call on my parentheses now. So I wanted to display the book title and the book author. So if you have list of our books, if you have 15 books, so it should be in this format: book title by the author, book title by the author, book title by what? By the author. So, and it is very easy to do. So the B that is iterating dot our title, right? So then by, we call on the B again. We call on our B again, B dot, then our what? Author. Don't forget, we defined all of this in our book class. And since we are using composition, it allows us to call on them. Then we say what? By book author. Then we can close our what? Our quotes. Can close the quotes. I need one. Why is it giving me two? So what is happening here? F string print. What is it flagging here? Okay. Print F string B dot title by B dot author. B dot title by B dot. Okay. Okay.
Did not open one.
I did not do what?
Did not open one before.
I can't hear you.
Mm.
I did not do what?
Sorry. You know, the first this in the first version of that stuff. I was going to push it through. Oh no, God. Everything, right?
Uh,
That
yeah, my F string, right? Okay.
that's the everything. That's it. Okay. Look
You are
at
not audible. You are not audible, Victor. Can you type
can
in
you
the
hear me?
chat? Okay, I can hear you now. Go on. I can hear you now.
Okay. Then you have the symbol, right? Then you close it. No.
Okay.
At the
Okay. After title. Thank you.
Yeah, close it. Yeah.
Thank you. So I closed it earlier than expected. Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, we should be fine now. So what if we don't? So we should be very mindful of handling error, right? And thinking of worst cases while developing or building programs, right? So now what if we don't have any book in our library? So what should happen? So in this case, so you can now use else, right? So what if there is no book? Something should happen now. So you can print now and say no books available. Yep. So this should be fine. So when we say no books available, so it should be fine. Yeah. So with all this, we should be able to be fine with our library management system. So before we test all of this out, so I'll just do a brief recap to bring us all to speed of what we've done. So we defined a book class, right? So instantiates our what are instance attributes. So we have the title and the author. So in this book, so we also have some management to track individual books. So to know when a book is checked out, to know when a book is returned, and we also have our helper method to assist us to be accessing the availability of books, right? To track the availability of books. So because we don't want to mess with the private attributes. Then also we want to build a complex system. So this complex system is, we won't be relying on this simple class, this simple program to just be tracking one book, right? So we want to be able to store arrays of books, right? So that's why we are now defining this library class. So I'm using composition. So in this class, we set an empty private attribute, which is list, to store collection of books. We define a method that will add books to the collection. So then in our collection also, when a book is checked out, you should remove it and let us know so that it's no more available, or as the case may be. So if a book is returned, it should be available and also let us know that this so person has returned this book, right? So we should also know the available books in our in our collection. So you should be able to tell us, currently we have this list of books available, right? So, and you should list it in the book title and by the what? By the author. So that is that on that. Now we've done all of this. Now let's us test our program to now check if it works as expected. So we are going to start from the very basic of testing our class, our book class, right? So the first thing we need to do is to instantiate or initialize our book class. So let's create two objects for our book class, two book objects, right? So let's call the first one book one, right? So let's call it book one, and say should be equal to book, right? So as a method or as a syntax for what? Instantiating objects. So now expectedly, this our book should take two arguments, right? So the first one should be as defined. So let's check again. So the first one should be title and the second one should be author. So expectedly. So now let's say anyone with idea of book we can use. So any book title and with the author. So we need two book objects. So I need instances, please. So the book title, please.
Book title. Let's
You
use
said
let's can go rich by
we should use what? Eh?
Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon.
If I
No. It said think, think,
you are not audible.
like Think and Grow Rich.
Okay, Think and Grow Rich by
Yes,
Napoleon. Okay,
yes.
thank you. Think and Grow Rich. So this is the title, right?
Yes.
So by then the second instance, Napoleon EU. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Awesome. So we have one object for our book class. So we are going to test all of the features and characteristics and the attributes we defined like till this minute. So let's just have one more object for our book. So one more book instance. So who is giving us another instance for our book?
TK and the
So
River.
you said
TK and the River.
Chike. This should be Chinua Achebe, Chike and the River.
Yeah.
So just say Chinua, right? Achebe. Okay. So
Come on.
oh, thank you for that. So now we have two books, right? So now I want to check something. So the first thing I want to check is I want to confirm if my if this is working, this is checked out, if it is working or not. So let's use one book object to confirm. So we will call it directly. I would also call it indirectly. So, and this would make sense now. So what Grace asked initially would make sense in a moment. So now let's first call book one, right? Dot. Now let's check if this book is checked out or not. So expectedly, we should expect these books to be available since we already have it in our book. So we've created a book object. So now to confirm if it is available or not. So this is where this one would make sense now. So now let's now print this and see. Book one dot is checked out. So let's print and see what we have. So it should return false. So false should mean that it is available. But let's see what it returns. Oops. Book one, Think and Go Rich, Napoleon, only books take no arguments. What do you mean books take no arguments? Books take no arguments. What do you mean? Let me check. Something should be wrong here. Self dot title equal to title, and self dot author should be equal to author, right? So, and we have that set to false. What do you have in the chat? You'll be fine, Victor. Okay, so I'm trying to check what is wrong here. Coming. So we have our book one and we declared book, Think and Grow Rich. So we have a title and we have okay, let me try another. Let me try and print out title first and let's see. Yeah, I'm trying to print out title. So let me see if this prints out anything. Book takes no argument. Well, we define parameters. Book one dot title. One moment. Book takes no argument. What error are we having? In line 62, okay. Book one is equal to book. What do you have here?
Are you supposed to leave like an empty bracket after the book dot title? After the book one dot title.
After the book one dot title.
In the print message, are we supposed to leave the bracket open or something? Like
Book
an
one
empty
dot.
bracket beside it.
Do you mean here?
Eh.
Yeah, we shouldn't use, we are calling instance here. So we need the brackets when we are calling methods. But since we are calling instance, so we don't need the brackets. We can only use brackets when calling on instance. Do you
Okay.
get? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, when calling on object rather. I guess it is my VS Code that is misbehaving. So that we don't lose all of these things we've done. So let me just, I'll close it and try and open it again.
You can
Because
use first.
you said?
As a controls define.
I see where the issue is. Yeah. Can you see, guys? Can you see, guys? I have just a single underscore to instantiate or to construct this attributes. So this is what is causing the issue. Can you see? So that is why it is saying that it has no arguments. It is funny. So let's just give it what it wants. So now let's go and check it again. Okay, so let's see it now. So we are going to run it again. So let's start from what? Okay, let's start with this and check. So if book one returns the title of the book. Yeah, my program is working. So book one title is what? Think and Grow Rich, right? So let's try and access book one author. So we want to know the author of book one. Yeah, someone told me about Think and Grow Rich. So who is the author? So I want to check. Okay, the author is who? We have what? Napoleon Hill. So I want to check if we have book one available. So this is why we now check book1 dot is, though we shouldn't be accessing this in this manner, right? So I just want to use this to compare the alternative we've defined. So can you see it's returned false? Do you see what I'm saying earlier? So this one just means like asking a question. Is book1 checked out? No, it is not checked out. False. It is still available. However, if you now use that it's available method that we defined. So now in this case, since we want to call on a method, we need parentheses, right? So now we are now asking now, is book1 available? So what do we have? Can you see this one returned true? Does it make sense? So this one returned what? True. Is book1 available? Yes, it is available. That's why we define this is available method. Let's check the same for book2. Is book2 available? Book2 dot available. It's also what? True, because it is what? Available. So now, what I want to do now is I want to check out book1 and now check its availability afterward to confirm if this is working. So how do I do this? So I would say book1 dot what? Don't forget we have methods to check out in our book2, but this method in our book class can only check out for, it's just like it cannot keep track of collection of books like a library. So what it can only keep track of is just a single book. This is why we are defining library to have a complex system. So I want to check out just one. So I will call on this checkout, right? So don't forget your parentheses. So after checking it out, I now want to confirm if the book is now available or not. So book1 checkout, then let's now check if book1 is now available afterward. So I'll see what it returns. So let me first clear the screen. So let's see what we have. Do you see what we have? Is book1 still available after checking it out? It's not, it's false. You see available, false, because it has been what? Borrowed, right? So now let's now return book1. So after checking it out, so let's now say we say book1 dot, now, now this is where I would now reintroduce polymorphism. In this case now, I have return book defined in two different classes. But what I need now is in the book class, right? So, and I have instantiated the book class with book1, right? So now saying book1 dot return book will call the one in the book class. I will not go and call the one in the library class. So this is what we are doing now is just what? Polymorphism. So I want to return the book. So after returning the book, I now want to check if the book is now available. So I'll just copy this one, right? So I'll paste it. So to check if it's now available. So after returning it, so it should return, it returned false now, right? So expected it should return true because I have returned it. So can you see? The first one returned false, and the second print statement returned what? True, because I have returned the book. So which means our book class is working as expected. Now, we can't rely on book class. We need a complex system that can track like as many books as what possible, right? So that would also allow us to know the books that are currently in our library. So when we have many books in the library, so if you want to check out a book, you should also be able to track it. If you want to return a book, you should also be able to track it. So we'll be running a test for that also now. So let me first clear this one. So to do that, the first thing we need to do is to first what? Instantiate our library class, right? So this is very important. So I will be calling the object library. So I'll be calling it library, right? I want library, not the library class. So library that I will use to instantiate. So this is what I want. Okay, so I'll say library is equal to what? To library, our class. This shouldn't create any confusion. So we are just basically instantiating, right? So now we have declared or instantiated or initialized a library object. Okay, so currently our library is, I don't even know. Okay, fine. I want to check what we have in the library now. So what should be the expectation? Can anyone guess? What should be the expectation? So you want to display all the books we have in the library. What should the expectation be?
I think we will empty. We've not added anything.
Thank you. You've not added anything, but let's check it out. So use it to confirm if our program is working or not. So you can see available books, right? So let's print out available books. So we just built the library, but we've not added anything. But we want to see if a magic can flood the library with books. So we are going to print it now and see what we have. Can you see it? So it's saying what? No books what's available. Can we see? No books what's available. So which is fine. So our logics are working. So I'll comment all these ones out so that they don't interfere with our test for our library. So I'll also comment this one also out. So we don't need all these ones for now. We'll comment this one too out. So, okay, now let's now say we want to add something to our library. I want someone to tell me what to type here to add a book to our library. So I just want to listen. So I just want to type. So let me scroll up so that you can have a glimpse of the methods available. So what am I supposed to type now in order to add a book to our library? So anyone?
Library.add book.
Library dot add book. So what does it take? What does it take? Does it take any argument or not? Don't forget in our definition. Did we define it to take any
To
argument
take
or not?
book 1 and book 2.
Thank you. So in this case, we are adding book 1 first. So it takes book 1. So this is where we are now building a use case for our library object. So we now want to add the book 1 that we ordinarily cannot keep track of if we depend on book class. So now to take book 1 and take it to our what? Our library, right? So which means our library now has one book. So now let's see if the method we defined is working or not. Then we would now print the available books in our library now. So let's see what we have. Let's see what we have. None. Okay. So we say library dot add book and we add book 1. So and we print library dot available book. So we can't say none. Can't be none. Let's go and review our code again. So what is missing in our add book method? So we say it should be add book self, then self.book.append. So we want to append the book, right? So now we are appending the book. So we added book 1. So then adding book 1 should be able to return to adding book 1 should be able to add the book to our lists. So since we've stated self.book should be equal to our what? To our list, and we are appending into our list, then we want to print it out, right? So let's check it again. Okay, so we're adding it to the list. Then we want to print out the available books in our list. Okay. Yep. So let's see what is missing in this. So we say the available printout should loop over the list, right? So for book in self.book. So if book is available, okay, then if available, then print available books, okay, then we want to iterate the available book we have. So if there is anyone, they want to print by title and by what? By author, or otherwise it should tell us that we don't have any book available. But in this case, we have a book available, so it shouldn't tell us none. So why is it
You
returning
know,
none?
you that book one or check out, are you not supposed to comment it, or it's not what is affecting it?
Okay. You are correct. You are right. You are right. You are right. So can you see what happened there? So we already, it's just like we don't have a book, right? So that was why it was returning none, because we already checked out to book one that we are trying to add into inside our what, our library. So after now on commenting that, so believing it's now available, right? So now see what we did in our available method. So it's first printed for us that available books. So let me add something here. So where is that available books? Okay, so yeah, you want to say available books, right? So should be, so what is our book one? Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. So I want this one to be something like, it should be in quotes. The title should be in quotes, right? So let's run it again. So can we see it here? So available books, they are what? Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Let's add one more book to our library and see what happens. So we are going to add book 2 now. So book 2. So let's print and see the available books we have. Can you see now? So we now have 2 books in our library. So our library is functioning well. So we are now using our library to store collection of books. So in this case, we are going to try the 2 other methods now by checking out a book using the title in a library and returning the book, then observing the behavior. But before we do that, let's create another object for book. So what should this book be? So let's call this, what should we call this one? Which other object should we create? Python introduction by who? I don't know. I just formed it too. So by who? Okay, so maybe I'll be writing the book.
Yeah.
Ibrahim.
so okay, we have a new book now, right? So which is what the title is Python Introduction, and it's written by Ibrahim Alawani, right? So in view. Okay, so we now want to, don't forget, currently we just have this, but we've not added it to our library. This should make sense. We've bought a new book, Python Introduction, but currently we've not taken it to the library. Now let's see if we run our available books again and see what we have. So we should not have that book. What is happening? What did I do wrong again? Okay, comma. Just ordinary comma. This thing does not have any joy. So okay, so can you see now? We still have 2 books. We still have what? 2 books. Now let's now create let's now take this book to the library and see what happens afterward. So we're going to copy this and use this method again, then make it book 3. Now let's print again and see what we have. So we now have this book in our library. So which means anyone who needs this new book now can access it in the library. So now this is a like okay, so someone wants to now come to borrow this Python introduction, right? So in this case, you would now say what? Let's say we added them, right? So we will now say library dot. So what is our method to check out book in the library? We call it what? Check out underscore book, right? So we say library dot check out underscore book. So don't forget, it takes an argument, which is the title of the book. So I will call this title what? Python Introduction. It's hot cake book. So as soon as it lands, someone has come to borrow it. So we checked this book out, right? So now after checking it out, so what happens, right? So we want to know, okay, fine, let's do this. Before checking it out, let's see what we have. Then let's see what we have after checking it out. This should make sense. What we have before checking it out and what we have after checking it out. So let's run this and see. So our available books, oops, what's wrong? Title. Did you mean title? Book object has no attribute. Title. Tile. What did I use tile again? I think I have messed with one of the methods. Book objects has no attribute. Tile. Did you mean title? I have messed with something in the method. Okay, let me go and check. I have messed with something in the method. Let me check. Okay, this is where I messed with it. So can you see? I misspelled this. Instead of title, I said what? And this is what the program wanted to call, right? We wanted to call this. So let's see what happens. What is happening? One moment. So let's say we have 3 books. Then we check this one out. So what do we have now? Shouldn't I be having 3 books after checking one out? What is happening? So we check out this book, Python. Did I spell it correctly? Python introduction, right? Then after checking it out, I want to see the available books. So it's stating that it's still available. Shouldn't be available. Okay. Let's see what is wrong. We need to check to find what is wrong here. So let's go back to our checkout list. Let's go back to our checkout list, our checkout method rather. I guess this is too complex for the program to comprehend. So we need to review this and look what is causing the conflict. So for booking, self the books, if book is this and the book is available, so book.checkout, right? Then if book is checkout, so you print book has been checked out. So let me for a moment on comment this, right? So I also want to comment this. I also want to comment this. Then if book is not found, so just print this out. So let me see this. For booking self.book, okay. So if book title is this and book is available, so you should check out the book, right? Then you should print book has been checked out, right? So then you print book has been checked out. Okay, so let's just say this one just wants to return. So it returns, right? So then if we can't find this book, so you should just refer back to the for loop and say this book is not in the library, right? Okay, so let's see again. So after this adjustment, so I'm going to run the same test again and see. So we added 3 books, then we check out this, then we want to see available book afterward. So let's see what happens. Awesome. I think it makes sense now, right? Awesome. So can we see now? So when I checked the book out, it states here that Python introduction is checked out successfully and is no more available, right? Then I now went ahead to now print the available books now. So I now have available books. So expectedly I have Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill and Chike and the River by Chinua Achebe, right? So I would make the same adjustment for the return as well, because I expect it to also misbehave as this one did. So I'll just be removing some complex definition we have here. So let me comment this one also out. So I don't need this. I will comment this one also. So I'll comment this one also. Then I'll just print this. Then I don't want this. So if it is not found, so just let me know, right? So, okay. So now let's now say we want to return, we are returning this book that I just borrowed, right? So I'll now come here and say library dot return book, right? So which book are we returning? Python introduction, right? So Python what? Introduction. So now after returning the book, so I want to now also know the books I have available in my shelf. So let's run this and see what is happening again. Book.title and not book dot is available. Did you mean available? Oops. You have an attribute error. So that should be spelling. You missed out on a spelling. Oops. Available and not book is available. Yeah, this one should be fine now. Okay, so I'm going to run it again. So as you can see it here, so expectedly, we have Python has been returned and it is now available. Then available books now are this, and this, right? So let's scroll up. Okay, it didn't print others. Let's comment them out. So we can confirm now that when we returned a book, so we now have it listed in our what available collection. So I think we can confirm now that the library system is working as what expected. So one more thing I want to check is, let me check something. So I want to check something in this method. So I want to check something in this logic. Let's say I didn't borrow, let's say we didn't borrow Python introduction. So let's say Python introduction is available. So I want to check something. We didn't borrow it, right? So we comment out that it is checked out. So essentially it is available. Okay, so I now want to return it. Logically, it's illogical, right? It's irrational. So you can't return what you didn't borrow. Okay, so I want to check how our program would undo this. So, okay, fine. I didn't borrow, but I now want to return it. So then I want to check the list and see what happens. So what do I have? Python introduction is not in the library. Return book. So we are having Python introduction is not in the library. Okay. So, okay. I think we define a logic. This is the logic we defined for it. Yeah, it's working. So, yeah, it's stating, we've defined it here that, okay, if this book has not been borrowed, right? So we should say it is not in the library. So I think that one is fine. So another thing I also want to check is, I want to check out a book that is not available in the library. So let's say library dot checkout book. We defined that if a book is not available in the library, you should be able to state it. So we just test with any book. So in this case, so I would say the book I want to check out for is, okay, so let's say there is a book written by David Goggins. So Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. So I want to check out this book. So even knowing that I don't have this book in my library, can anyone tell me the issue we are having here. Why is it flagging this can't hurt me that I typed? Can anyone say it? Can anyone identify?
You know that you use that
Single quotes, right?
yes,
Okay, what if I want
and
to use
that
this
can't
single quote?
has a single
Also
quote.
as apostrophe, right? So what if I want to use this single quotes? How do I escape this flag? I don't want to use double quotes. I want to use single quotes. How do I escape this flag?
You can easily write
I can easily write what?
cannot.
Cannot. No, I don't want to write cannot. I want to use can't. And I
Use
don't want to
format
use
now.
double quotes. I don't want to use format. I'm not using format. You can't even use format here. You are
You
not,
can't
this is
use
not a
format
print
now.
statement. No, this is not a print statement.
Okay, sure.
So there is something called escape sequence or escape character. So that is what you can use here. So essentially it is recognizing this place to be the end of the title, right? But it's still saying another one and it's flagging it. So now for you to now understand that, no, this is not an end, but I need this apostrophe here. So there's something called escape character. So once you put this escape character here, right? So it's now understand that this apostrophe is not, doesn't translate to what an end to the string, but what part of the title I am trying to what impute. So it should work now. Okay, yeah, expectedly. So it states that, why is it now saying Python introduction? We say can't hurt me. So, but it's stating that it is not in the what? It has even run away. So it's stating that it is not in the what? In the library. So as defined. So as we define it here, that if a book in checkouts, so if the book is available, say it is checked out. If otherwise, say it is not in the what? In the library. So to a large extent, so you can all confirm that our library system is working what as expected. So for a quick recap, before I take in questions, if there is any, so we've been able to define a complex system out of like a simple structure of our book class, right? That can only manage just single book, but we now have collection of books. So we know nature of a library now. So you can have thousands, scores of books. So we now want a database that we're keeping this to track it, to know if a book has been borrowed, to know if a book has been returned, to know available books and the likes. So essentially, this is what we just did. So we are able to achieve this using both concepts for today's session, right? So which are composition. So we also saw polymorphism in action. So by using the same attributes, the same method here in our library class, as well as the same method being used in our what? Book class, and one does not contradict the other. So this is what composition we just did, right? So we didn't inherit anything, right? So but the availability or the flexibility, being able to use a method of a class in another class, right? It's what translates to composition, as we have seen in this our what solution we just built for library management system. So if there is any question, please you can let me know, and I would try as much as I can to answer it. So it's been a long session already. So we are about 2 hours, 45 minutes into the session, if I'm correct. So guys, it's been a long ride. So, and questions, please. It's been a long ride. Questions, please. So it could be on what we've done basically, or if you still have any confusion or any issue with composition, or if you are still confusing it for inheritance, so that I can still find ways to break this down and make it fundamental for comprehension. Question, guys. Okay, so I don't want this to be longer than this. So we'll be taking question in the background. So I'll be stopping the recording now. So it doesn't have to be more than this. So I'll stop the recording now.